Okay. So there we have an event on the sun, which came when we said there would be something happening on the sun which would cause a big effect. Now, this stuff came off the sun at about half the speed of light and disrupted the ionosphere about 15 minutes later. And then about, another 10 or 12 hours later, the jet stream itself got shifted, and we had the dramatic weather changes around the world which followed. Now, it's important to notice that, you know, there was a chain of events predictable. It's also, because I know you were talking about cosmic rays yesterday, it's clear the mediation between the solar action and the weather is the particles coming. There's nothing to do with cosmic rays being modulated or anything in this. We have to look at the real mechanisms to understand. Now, if you want to look at the longer picture, you can see there is a close correlation between particles from the sun, as measured by carbon-14, or using cosmic rays as a proxy, of course, for these, and world temperatures. And this is, nobody disputes these figures from either side. And of course, there's not such a graph of CO2 anywhere. I was in Moscow in 2004 and so showed some graphs like this, not this one, to show a very close correlation between geomagnetic activity and temperatures. And I asked Professor John Houghton there, I said, wouldn't this be nice if one of these was CO2 and the other were temperatures? And he was sitting right there, and funnily enough, he didn't even say yes. Now, what signals come from the sun? The main signal in particles, counting particles from the sun, and cosmic rays, of course, because they're modulated by the magnetic field, the scalar field and particles, is the 10 or 11 year cycle. That is the main signal of activity that comes from the sun. However, world temperatures do not follow that as they would if they were modulated by cosmic rays, for example, if cosmic rays were the link. They follow a 22-year signal, which is the magnetic links between the Earth and the sun, because the magnetic lines of force guide the charged particles to the northern hemisphere or southern hemisphere. So that is why, well, okay, leave aside the explanation, but just a fact, the fact is we have Hale cycle, the magnetic cycle of the sun, as the main signal in world average temperatures, by far the main signal, actually. There's plenty of others and lots of things to think about there. Now, another very interesting thing is that if you look, and this is an American graph, and I know there's at least one American in the audience, and he knows that it must be true because it's in America, this data. You see all these fluctuations, little fluctuations, and there's CO2 just going up, which is absurd. And of course, the reason for the CO2 being high now is probably that we're 800 years after the medieval warm period. And historically, you can see geologically that the CO2 goes up about 800 years after temperature rises. So this is probably all we're experiencing, medieval warm period effect. Anyway, leave that aside. The important thing about this curve is that I want to show is this 60-year envelope. Very interesting, and we're at the peak of one of these, or now just past the peak of one of these. Now, our understanding of this 60-year is that, in fact, and we go through some others of them and talk about them. There's another one here, 60-year one of what happens in the Atlantic. There's a 60-year envelope of what happens in the Tibetan Plateau, for example, where it's very acute. And another thing about, in this case, tornadoes. The last time there was this biggest hit of tornadoes in the USA, as the one which destroyed Joplin, was about 60 years ago. Now, of course, it's very dangerous sort of measuring things by counting deaths, because you could have tornadoes which didn't hit a town, and there could be lots of them. But certainly, the fact lots of people were killed is there was definitely evidence of a lot of tornadoes around then. Another sort of 60-year thing. You've probably noticed on the TV they go jumping up and down saying the last time the floods were as big as this in Thailand, in Bangkok, was around 60 years ago. Now, where does this 60 years come from? Well, it's beats. It's the beats between, our understanding, the periodicity of the nodal crossing of the Moon. The Moon's orbit is tilted relative to the ecliptic, which is the one the Earth goes around the Sun in, and the plane of that orbit rotates. So the line joining where you get eclipses, the Sun, Moon, Earth line, or rather the plane of the Moon's orbit, the axis of that where it crosses the ecliptic rotates. And every 9.3 years, so it goes in a circle of 18.6 years, but every 9.3, of course, it's tilting up or down, pointing at the Earth, and that's this n. And you can get beats out of this if you take n, take off twice the Hale frequency, and what comes out is a periodicity of about 58 years or so. Obviously, it fluctuates a bit, and there's not because a Hale cycle is not consistent. And if you want to look at what really is happening, very interesting, we plotted on here the colours. The yellow colour just means you're in the odd sunspot cycle declining phase, okay? So where it says 17, that's the peak of the sunspot cycle, and then it's declining. Then after that, you start the even phase, and then you have another odd phase rising, odd phase falling, and so on. So we just put the yellow on because that's all we're interested in. And we see if you also have, at the peak of the yellow, solar eclipses in the first half of December. Now, don't worry about why, but that's just a way of measuring the phase position of the Moon's orbit. If you have those there, you also get a super peak, right? You can see within this, if you look, there's 22-year cycles, but the biggest ones happen when this coincidence occurs there, or number 17 here, or number 11 here. You see, big peak, big peak, big peak. And those give you roughly your 60-year cycle. So we can actually see physical connections. Now, of course, there's nothing here about CO2. I mean, it's completely insane to say CO2 is somehow causing this. It's utter madness and fraud. And it's also no case to say cosmic rays are modulating this. There's no evidence of that either. Not to say cosmic rays haven't a role, but just say in terms of anything serious that they're not. World temperatures, is what I'm saying, or any meteorological parameter basically, is going to be some type of product, if you like, of solar activity, magnetic linkages, lunar modulations, and other things, such as modulations by stratospheric winds, which are also driven by the sun anyway, but that's the... So we then say, all right, you can have all these mathematical descriptions, and just think theoretically for a moment. You can have a many-dimensional vector, or whatever you want to call it, and we call them weather action indicators. Okay, weather action indicators describe the real forcing factors between the sun and the earth, and the modulations. So, you want to know what's going to happen next summer? Okay, so middle of summer, midsummer's day, we look at what these weather action indicators in our theory will be, look back in the past as to when they were last in a similar state, and we say, well, okay, this state and that state are similar, so the weather corresponding must be similar. And then we use the weather in the past to predict the weather in the future. So we do not have a bank of supercomputers. We have something no bigger than this, in fact. And our carbon footprint is much smaller than the Met Office. Not that I care about carbon footprints. I want to have a carbon footprint as big as Al Gore's myself. Okay, now if you look at some more details, you can see, well, 132 years before now, for example, there must have been certain things similar in general terms, not in detail, but in general terms, because you're going to have 6 Hale cycles and 7 eclipse cycles, okay? Or you could play around and say 131 or 133 years, but it doesn't matter. We've chosen 132 and it works best for various reasons. Now, okay, we do notice in England there was a series of floods, and I did announce this at a dinner in Imperial College in 2007, before the floods came, right? There were floods in 1875, 1876, 1877, not in 1878, and there was also some more in 1879. The corresponding years, 132 years later, were 2007, 2008, 2009, where there were all floods, lots of floods in England. 2010, no floods, as there were not in 1878. And 2011, the worst of floods, as we warned there would be, mainly in the north and in Scotland. Whereas all those years, the Met Office had said, you know, barbecue summer and all that sort of nonsense. So we were right and they were wrong. Okay. This is just some pictures of the floods in England, which were not barbecue summers. We had the winter of 09 and 10, which we predicted this very cold weather, including the icing. A number of people were killed on the roads because the UK ran out of road salt. It's something we'd warned of. So it is a fact that the belief in man-made climate change is causing deaths, even in Europe, quite apart from people starving through lack of food, because the food price is going up. This is our prediction of the coldest December for 100 years. We announced that, well, in May before this, May 2010, we said it was going to be snowy, but we didn't have much idea about how much. Then nearer the time, we were much more explicit. And this is what happened. I have to say at the time, no one believed what I said, and just said this was madness. However, it did happen. It's fair to say the January was still cold, but not as cold as we thought. February definitely got milder than we expected, and we understand a bit about the reason for that now. However, all that apart, had you placed weather bets on our forecast, for every pound or every Deutschmark, which doesn't exist anymore, does it, that you put down, you would make 14 Deutschmarks if you were betting on our forecast, which you have to say is quite a good return, isn't it? Well, I used to do weather bets. Well, I do weather bets when they're offered in public, and I have some for snow at Christmas in the UK. But I was banned. I did my own weather betting. There's a deal with William Hill, and I'm banned from that because they lost too much money. Okay. Now, carrying on with the this year, just moving into the start of this year, there were a lot of floods in Australia where again the global warmers were jumping around saying it's all to do with this and that. But the data's there. Even the films on the BBC showed the dates of when floods had last happened. And if you bother to look, it is just bothering to look, you can see that they happen, these big floods, when you've got the same phase of the eclipse cycle, which is solar eclipses on or around the 4th of January, and you've got to also be in the right El Nino or Enso phase. And if these coincide, you will get floods. And it also means there's a fair likelihood they'll have them this year as well. We haven't got a detailed forecast of that. But again, these are scientifically comprehensible, nothing to do with mankind. And of course, you probably know that at the time, because of what the warmers had said, the Australian government had ended the construction of some dams, which were meant there to end flooding. Well, it meant there was more flooding and more deaths because of their stupid ideology. Okay, later on in the year, this was quite a significant thing. We had a simultaneous prediction of blizzards in the USA and a cyclone off Queensland. They both happened with great dramatic effect, and the cyclone caused world coal prices to go up because the open cast mining in Queensland was disrupted. A bit later on in the year, there was those earthquakes in New Zealand, and we noticed that just before the Japan earthquake, there was a big solar event on the sun, which happened to be my birthday, but nothing to do with it. And we wondered, could it be that there's actually a connection between solar activity and earthquakes? Now, we conclude there is. We're doing what we call just trial forecasts on this. But we have had quite a lot of success at identifying simultaneous events on the sun, or shortly following afterwards, earthquakes as well as extreme weather events. If you think about it, they are caused by the same magnetic connections affecting the roots of the magnetic field in the under the earth and so on. So it's complicated, but there is, we've had very definite successes. And the period we're in right now, the current few days or few days just gone, there was a number of earthquakes following the big events on the Sun in the period we had warned of. Next one, very significant. We said there would be a tornado swarm in the middle of USA, and we listed the states, including Missouri, at around these dates. Where are we? 23rd, 24th. There was a tornado swarm, and Joplin was destroyed in Missouri. This was done, I think that was made about, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks ahead. But we can make forecasts 12 months ahead. I mean, it depends on pressure of work and so forth, but we can make them further ahead. This was just another example of something we expected about simultaneous geomagnetic activity. It was a huge event on the Sun, 100 million electron volts events. The dates are all in the presentation, but we did get the simultaneous earthquakes and extreme events. And instead of an earthquake, we had a volcano chain erupting, which is there. Okay. Now, next one to mention a bit later on in the year was Hurricane Irene. We predicted 85 days ahead in a whole season tropical storm forecast for the Atlantic region, there would be something forming to the east of the Bahamas or thereabouts at around these dates. Here we are, 23rd to 25th of, this is August. And it would graze the shore and head up north, and it would be a big storm. Well, that happened to the day, and the track followed. And we also gave real-time or 2-day ahead predictions of how the standard meteorology forecast would go wrong in the terms of the track. They kept saying, and Obama was jumping up and down, catastrophe, catastrophe, catastrophe. We said, well, yeah, but not as bad as that, because it's going to stay out in the sea more than you think. It did stay out in the sea more than they thought. And as you know, New York wasn't anything like, well, it wasn't in any serious trouble at all, because the storm stayed out at sea and crossed Long Island instead and so forth. So we were pleased with that, but so far the American authorities have ignored completely what we said, even though I did speak to one guy on the phone who was genuinely very interested, but I dare say his boss told him, don't reply to that email. Okay. So what about longer ahead? Now, Timo, I don't know if you heard of this man, Timo, he's died now, but he was really the founder of International Climate Skeptics email blog, okay? Very, very significant guy, worked very hard on the matter. He pointed out some time ago that if you just stack up solar activity curves smoothed out, one starting 1821, the other 1600, they work together quite well. And we know that if you average over 22 years, you're going to have a close correlation with world temperatures. Funnily enough, the time period he chose was exactly 10 hail cycles, which is interesting. So anyway, he said, and we say too, and we looked at it further, that means, because the Dalton minimum occurred around the 1815, 1820, we're going to have a repeat of this coming soon. And we are here. Okay. We're beginning of the plummet of temperatures. And he said 2031, we think more like 2035 for various reasons, but that'll be the minimum. So we are heading for a Dalton-type minimum of world temperatures, which will affect Europe considerably. There'll be more very cold winters and more lousy summers. Well, just to summarise what we said this year, that was just a detail. We said the summer in UK and Ireland would be wet with floods in places, correct. There would be more East European heat, although we'd also said on Russian TV it's not going to be as bad as last year, which was correct. There'll be more very extreme events going to carry on, have been carrying on, and will carry on for the next year or two. But then there will be a decline in these very extreme events because the sort of interlocking of the solar-lunar effects won't allow this phase locking of the jet stream so much. There'll be more mobility, basically. But it would be colder. Be more boring and cold. And there'll be general world cooling. And the main part, another problem for mankind, as I said, is climate change policy. It will die, but I don't know. I'm better at predicting the weather than politics. Okay, now just a little summary. The point is we have to do science observationally. All theories are inadequate and incorrect and always have been, okay, including what I say. But just to understand how you can logically get to where we were and where we are, if you just looked at temperatures from 1975 to 2000 and CO2, they move together, and you could believe CO2 is causing world temperatures, all right? Now, after these, the global warmers set about finding data to prove themselves in the past. Now, everything they found in the past disproved what they believed. However, they haven't told us that. If you look at things like cosmic rays, they can also explain a lot. Just you look at cosmic rays. However, when you look at, say, the 22-year signal, the 60-year signal, the cosmic ray theory of connection, the linkage between the sun and the earth being cosmic rays, doesn't work. If you do light variations in the solar cycle, again, it doesn't work to explain those things, because you should have 11-year signals, or you have 22-year signals. If you just use our solar activity and magnetic things, which we did, we couldn't understand the 60-year cycle. That was a mystery. However, if you include lunar, you can understand the 60-year cycle, and you can also do extreme event forecasting many months or even 12 months ahead to a 85% accuracy against a luck level of would be less than 10%. For the extreme, well, Hurricane Irene to the date, track and so on, the chance of that, getting that right must be, well, 1%, I would have thought, if not less. Anyway, so to conclude, what to do? I say enjoy life. Now, in England, they say Germans never enjoy themselves, which actually... it's not true. So enjoy life, enjoy the planet, drive that car if you want to. Okay. The petrol prices have gone up, so, you know, save money as well if you can. But the main thing to accept is man cannot change climate. You can change weather locally with an umbrella. That's as far as you can go, really. Stick at that. Concentrate on science. Stop all these carbon games. Now, you see, I think the CO2 stuff is an ideological, political game. And there's a lot of things hidden behind it. One of them is create a bubble of false value to you know, for the banks to play around with. And I know at Waterloo Station there was these great posters for, they were up for about a year, how you can make money on carbon trading. They've all disappeared now, interestingly, and I don't think they're ever going to come back. And what to do is use scientific forecasts, because you can save lives and save economic collapse in places if you prepare. And in terms of what politicians ought to do, we should have open debate, which is something they don't like. Although I would say in the last year, astoundingly, I found myself in a situation where the global warmers were forced to debate. One was they were tricked to coming into a big conference, an insurance conference of Guy Carpenter in Britain, and I think they invited the man from Swiss Re first and then told him I was going to be there. And, well, he had to debate, and frankly, he had nothing to say. He showed his forcing factors, and I said, well, yeah, fine, but they don't work, do they? And he said, He had nothing to say. Then there was another one at the Congress of Brilliant Minds in Madrid, where they brought along Molina, Nobel Prize winner, and the director of the proceedings asked him, well, just what is your evidence for man-made climate change? And he said, and I was in complete disbelief, he said, our evidence is the consensus of scientists. I said, yes. He said, yes, that's it. That is it. The consensus of scientists is the evidence. And I said, well, okay, but, you know, I should at least tell you what the University of East Anglia say is the evidence, and asked him to comment. And I told him what they said the evidence is, because I'd asked them this in a big meeting in the Royal Society, where they didn't realise we were there, and we put up our hands and asked for the evidence, which does not appear in the minutes, by the way. The question was, what's the evidence? And the top shot from University of Eastern said, one, Mr. Corbyn, what you say about cooling effects of plants isn't as big as you say. I said, well, okay, maybe it's not, but it's there, isn't it? But they, Then they said, and Venus. Venus? Is there Venus on Earth? No. So anyway, Venus, warm Venus, and of course the answer is Venus is nearer the sun and it's got a much thicker atmosphere, so that's why it's hotter. And the third thing is, she said it can't be anything else. I said, well, we know it is something else. But that is their answer. That is their answer. Molina didn't know their answer, and he didn't have anything to say either. I have to say they were very poor. Okay, we should obviously be campaigning against these mad laws, but I just do want to say we should keep honest green policies. I mean, we defend biodiversity, we like forests. We might even recycle at time to time because it saves money, I mean, it's a good thing. So we don't want to be accused of just being, well, burn, kill, destroy people. We're not at all. We believe in honest green policies and honest application of science. And the last thing is what the UN should be doing is scrapping the IPCC and actually making, spending more money to get involved in real disasters, their prediction and preparation therefore, to reduce losses and save lives. And I'll end there. Thank you.